Okay, morning. It's the morning after. Done that before. Anyway, you can see that the frets are in. They're shaved down the edges. I've kept a fairly thick layer of tape up on the edge of this thing because it's a pretty ancient lacquer, and I'd need to, if I scrape anything with these various files, I want it to hit masking tape and not the old binding. So next stage on this, I think, if I can just get my head straight, yeah, it's amazing with this tool. There's almost, I've never been able to do a refret without skipping this. It has this, the way it's designed, it sort of insists on skipping off, and it goes across the top of the frets and gives you some scratches. But kind of luckily, I suppose, it's this stage of the process prior to doing a fret leveling, which is going to require the whole surface of the fret to be, you know, scratched up and thingied off, cleaned off, polished off. So, yes, if it's going to scratch the frets, now's the right time to do it. So, as you can see, I'm just layering, covering the fingerboard with masking tape. This process is why it's probably good not to have put any, resisted the temptation to have put any oil on the fingerboard, because right now oil on the fingerboard just makes the tape lift off. So it's good to hold off until the very end, even though it sort of urges to make it look really nice and dark and lustrous. Obviously in a minute I'm going to just switch this round, and I need to cut some thinner bits to get all the way up. And you can see I'm leaving the existing binding on and keeping as much paper on this as is necessary just to protect it. And it's the low tack masking tape I'm using, so the idea being is it grips as lightly as possible onto the lacquer, which, given that it's pretty old, you know, we've got to be very careful. I'm just going to move a couple of things around. I've got this Bigsby, the Gear 4 music thing that I tried to set up with a different earthing system. I'm going to just solder the thing together and test it a bit later on. But to be honest, if it doesn't doesn't earth properly, then it's not even worth fighting with. I'm just going to scrap it and keep the parts. It's just so annoying the way that it was designed. When it was, it's just pointless. I don't know if somebody not in the musical industry business put it together. You know, and you can imagine it being a factory somewhere, maybe a Chinese factory, just knocking out things, turning their hand to guitar manufacturing, maybe early in the production stages. Who knows? But it certainly doesn't. It doesn't work. It doesn't ground the circuitry the way it should. And if you can't do that, then you're just going to get buzzing the whole time, which is what I noticed as soon as I plugged it in. And it's probably why, it's probably a very good reason, one of the very good reasons why the youngster who sold it to me had got fed up with it, because you wouldn't be able to do anything with it buzzing away like that. And you could hear the pickups, but it was a hell of a din on top of it. So having completed the refret part of Hughes 335, I have to say there's nothing stands out. Didn't come across anything that was completely unexpected. Although I can hear wasps trying to find a way of using the shed as a place to have a nest. They're constantly buzzing away. Yeah, I've got Radio 4 in my headphones. Desert Island discs, I think. Yeah, so nothing stands out or surprised me in the refret. Again, it was very useful to have done quite a bit of practicing on the best ways to reach those upper frets and the upper parts of a glued neck, and the jig that I used worked really well. It takes some thinking through, and I think that was always the thing for me, is that you don't have to you don't have to tell yourself that you can't do something just because you don't have the correct tools. You know, the reality is that tools make things, most of the time, tools make things that you can do easier. Occasionally, tools do things that you just can't do. I mean, it's a bit like the Serenity Prayer, is you really need to know the difference. You need to know when you're in a situation where you just can't do something because you don't have the right tool. It's smart to know that. But the majority of the time, it is just about the fact that tools make it easier to do something that it's possible to do. So things like having a jig, making a jig to clamp in all of those frets in the high parts of the neck. It's possible to do without the hey Morris. Possible to do without some expensive tool. But of course you can see that I'm using some tools which are specialist tools for the purpose. Thank you, Morris. Down there will be good. You know, so as long as you can't really do it without the cord and the brass inserts. I mean, you can do it with a hammer. I've not tried that. I don't like the idea of that. I think I just get a feeling you could be there for a long time trying to hammer frets in. But people have done it for thousands of years, so, or hundreds of years or whatever, so I'm sure it's possible. But yeah, the minimum you'd need would be the caul that holds the brass inserts, and a way of clamping those on, using those to clamp the fret in. And of course you need, for bound neck, you need the tang tool for undercutting the tang or taking the fret tang away, so you have the overhang to go at the top of the binding. So, you know, there are a minimum number of things to do it safely, but after that it comes down to ease. You know, and even the way I've got the press set up here isn't ideal, but it's a compromise between all the other things I have to do in this very small space. So, you know, that thing about using the rope to suspend the guitar, I've never seen it done like that, but why not? You know, it's what I need to do in this small limited space to get it done. So, but you know, you just got to think over cautiously all the time. You've got to have this mapped out so that you anticipate what could go wrong and make sure you head that off before it has a chance to go wrong, because you don't want to find out the hard way, basically. So I saw on some website the other day that you can buy special pre-cut tape for this purpose, but I looked at the price of it, and I have to say it was it's high price. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it was a couple of quid per roll of each of the sizes. You know, and I know it's dead cool, and you know, you start off without having to do this business here, but I mean, how much time did it take me to cut these slices? Not an awful lot. You know, and you still got to cut each of the lengths that you need, or you tear the lengths, so it doesn't do everything for you. But there you go. It's a typical example of tools. You can get a tool to do just about anything anything that can be done, if it can be made a tiny fraction easier, then the tool will do it, if you want to pay the money. Right, so today is Sunday, so I'm trying to get this, I'd like to get this done today, but I also need to have a bit of time before getting ready to go to a band practice. I don't want to be in a rush, as I usually am, so I'm going to try and finish early. And if it means I have to leave some of this till another time, which will be next weekend, then so be it. Although I prefer not to. I'm going to like to do this. I'm conscious that underneath the edges here I've got some quite worn out lacquer, which I have to be very cautious about. Potentially may want to come off at the earliest opportunity. These, I'm just going to do a quick check. That's quite way clear of that, so just making sure that the pickups are completely clear of the path of any file that I'll use to level these frets, which they are, and then I'm just going to cover them up so that the dust from the fret leveling process doesn't end up down inside the pickups. I'm just hopefully pinching off all these tabs around the back. And then these will grip probably just down on the side, and there we have it. Masked off. Oh, there goes the blade. So, the question here is, what tool are we going to use to level these? Looking pretty good, actually. Now, a slow and steady version would be to use the 12-inch radius block with sticky tape on it. I'm only going to do that if I'm convinced, or fairly convinced, that the frets are more or less even to begin with. But also, importantly, I want to make sure that I want to be fairly certain that they are, that this radius that I've put these frets into is a very clear 12-inch radius. And the reason for this is because the radius block, as a fret leveling tool, the radius block is really unforgiving. Wherever it is. Where's the 12-inch block gone? It's here under my pile of things. Okay, so this is quite a tight angle. Okay. First of all, I'm not going to touch it yet because I need to make sure that the neck is flat, which brings me back to that conversation I was having yesterday, for which I still don't know the answer. But anyway, so the issue about using a radius block with sandpaper is it is very accurate. All right, that's a very accurate 12-inch radius. I suppose I could show it on the whiteboard if you can see this without just too much distortion. So if let's say this is the guitar neck with the frets on it. If the thing about the radius block is that it's absolutely kind of rigid in its radius, and you can see from here is if this is maybe a bit flatter than 12 in reality once we put the frets in, what will happen is, if I draw the frets on here really crudely, let's call that the fret and we'll make it follow the line as close as we can, right? A bit. So imagine now we map that 12-inch radius block onto this, and I'll take it away for a second. We know that let's pretend that it's curvier than the actual thing. So what we get is a radius that will kind of look, this is very exaggerated, but it potentially does that, which you'll see a huge, great sort of taking off of material at the edges, or huge, great, a relatively large thing, and you'll end up, your block will impose a 12-inch radius back onto the neck, which will be absolutely correct. It's 12 inches for sure, but in doing so it will potentially take the edges right down. Now if we did the same job with the crimson fret leveling file, so let's say there's our, whatever it is, nearly 12-inch radius, right, and we take the crimson file sort of basically does things like that. It does slices, but it does it in kind of, you know what I mean, tangents. You're wearing it a bit that way, then on top, then on top, then to the side, then to the side. So it will respect the existing radius, whatever that radius actually is. And as I say, using the rigidity of the block will always impose its whatever it is, its particular radius onto the thing, regardless of what's there. If we know that it's pretty close to 12, then it's probably a good tool to use because it's incredibly accurate. That means that everything you get once you've done it, you know everything's absolutely at 12, which is nice. You just have to be confident that the thing is 12 inches radius to begin with. The other thing you've got to make sure is that the neck you're about to do this on is straight and as flat as it can be. Pretty good actually. Just going to check with a straight edge, and I know before anyone tells me, this is not technically a straight edge, and I know it's now currently doing it under with the effects of gravity, and as a result it's bent back. And if we do it on its side, oh sorry, you can't see this, never mind. Okay, so what am I saying? We've got a bit of concavity there, or either that or an incredibly high fret. Okay, I'm just going to sight my way down there. Yeah, and it is. It's got some concavity. So I'm going to just I'm going to take some counterclockwise turn on here. I think this is the right one. Tuck under here. Yeah, it's a US one. It's Imperial. It's working. That's interesting. It's very, very loose already. So that's telling me that is as flat as we're going to get it for the purposes of this fret leveling. In fact, it probably needs to be under, for this board to be flat, I can't actually get it there with the truss rod. That's interesting. It's almost there, but it's just a teeny weeny bit off. And there's no further adjustment I can make on this one-way truss rod from the 1980s. So, as a result, I'm going to sit it under its own gravitational pull, because basically what I want, and no matter how I get it, I want a flat board in order to make sure that these frets are even relative to each other. That's all I really care about, is that one is level relative to that one and that one and that one. The fact that we're going to eventually put them into a curve, oh god, I'm going into having a discussion about that thing. Yeah, so the fact that we're going to put this whole thing into a curve. Sorry, it's a terrible view. Yeah, if we start with the thing level, okay, and we're going to make sure. So let's do exaggerated, right? Oh look, there's a high fret, and there's some good frets. So we're going to do a leveling job, and it's going to make all of these frets level relative to each other. And we're going to do it with the neck in as flat a position. In this case, almost no matter how we get that neck into that position, doesn't really matter. Currently I've got it by putting it under its, just a bit under its own gravity. Because the what do you call it, truss rod won't let me get it quite flat enough, but now it's flat. So I'm going to level the frets like that, and then obviously when you put the guitar under load, this is extremely exaggerated, but you're going to get that happen, and it means the neck totally exaggerated. It's not going to be as extreme as that, obviously, but under string load the neck will be like that in the playing position. Let's say there's a bridge point here, okay, and let's say there's a nut or whichever, it doesn't really matter. And what you're going to find is that when you fret a note, the string's going to come down to there, and then it's going to come away from there and rise up to the nut, or I've made it huge just to exaggerate. And of course, the reason we have relief in it at all is nothing to do with this really. The reason you have relief is if you, let's say we played a string on here, we know that the string kind of describes a circle, like a skipping rope in the middle of its travel, right? And if we don't have any relief in the middle, no space for the string to do this maximum movement, then it's going to hit the frets, right? So the purpose of relief is to create some spinning space. Now we've levelled our frets, the neck is pulled into a bit of relief, and you fret the note. What matters is that there's enough space, clearance between the string and its the way it comes up over that next few frets, and all that matters is that this distance is enough on the first fret and increases at a steady rate on the other frets, so that you can guarantee that wherever you play it there is clearance, right? So if we played the next one further along, this is really bad, I could do it with a ruler, but let's say we played the next one and then that rises at a steeper angle to the nut or whatever end it is, and the same applies here. You've got enough clearance here, you've got enough clearance there, and so on. Now you can see straight away what would happen if there's an unusually high fret. Let's say this one is an unusually high fret, we hadn't levelled it. That's obviously going to, you press there, that string is going to hit that fret and it's going to cancel out the note. So you're going to play there, but in fact it's going to play that note at best, or it's going to buzz on there. So the point of the levelling is to even out these so that we can guarantee that there is a consistent sufficient clearance between each of these, between the string and the frets. Now this is the bit that really totally doesn't get it. I'm going to do this as an extreme diagram. So anyway, just to reiterate, the levelling of the frets makes sure that there is this consistent gap. The gap is ensured by the rising the string from this point to this point. Providing that nut height is higher than the fret, you'll always have a gap between these, providing you A, may level the frets first of all, and B, there is a degree of relief, because that gap will increase with a bit more relief. But we do it flat, so that even if we didn't have any, even if we had the truss rod cancelling this out, and in the unlikely event we wanted to play with a completely flat neck, which isn't advisable because the string can't rotate freely, draw it, God. Even if we chose deliberately to play with a flat neck, it's the height of the bridge and the bridge and the nut that will still ensure, the fact that we've levelled the frets will still ensure there's a gap. Now that would play, as you often will find when you've got a guitar that's been properly fret levelled but has no relief in it. But what will happen is, whilst you can play it, there's not enough room here for the string to vibrate up and down in its normal sort of spin that it wants to do, particularly on the bass strings. So the purpose of the relief is purely to keep those nice level frets where they were, so that we know that they've got the same relationship of clearance, but we introduce this curve into it, even though the frets are climbing up the hill and climbing down the hill, right? And the same thing happens down to here, clearance of there, we know it's going to clear that fret, which is great, but now we've created space, right, for the string to vibrate. Now if, this is the bit that I don't get, totally don't get, if you were to do what it seems that these machines or the jigs that Stewmac talks about proposes, is you get your thing, you put the strings on, and guess what happens? We know that the strings pull it into a bowed thing. Okay, and we say, okay, we're going to set this to the correct relief, right, which is sort of a distance away from the horizontal. So we choose the right relief as if we were in playing mode. Okay, so once we've done that, the jig remembers that, right, and there we have it, and there we have our frets going down there for various levels of unevenness. Look, there's an uneven one, so on, so on. This is highly exaggerated. Then the first problem I've got, even though this is exaggerated, the first problem I've got is